The number one essential for having healthy relationships is to have Jesus Christ at the center of your marriage, your family, your relationships. And last week we talked about how to fight fair, and we looked at James 1:19-20. It says, "My dear brothers and sisters, always be willing to listen, slow to speak. Do not become angrily easily, because anger will not help you live the right kind of life God wants." And we talked about how three things, James tells us three things: that we need to listen, we need to be quick to listen, we need to be very careful with our words, and then we need to deal with anger in a righteous way. And we looked at how the Bible is very specific of what we are not to use in conflict. And we looked at Colossians 3:8, says, "But now always put these things out of your life: anger, bad temper, doing or saying things to hurt others, and using evil words when you talk." We just talked about things that we need to really keep off the table when we are in conflict with another person. We talked about we're never to call names. Can't go there. Never raise your voice, because that will always escalate the conflict. And we talked about do whatever you need to do to keep from going there. If you got to just step back and do some breathing exercises, jumping jacks, or singing a chorus of Kumbaya, whatever you need to do, don't go there. Don't raise your voice. Don't do history lessons. Don't pull out a failure in the past or a previous argument. Never say never, because that's usually never the case, okay? When you say you never do this or you always do this, automatically that other person's going to get defensive. And then we talked about never threaten divorce. That's like the lowest blow. Nothing ever comes from that. Nothing good ever comes from that. And we just talked about how we need to identify deadly verbal phrases and words and take those things off the board. And you've got to agree that there's just some things that are out of bounds. That no matter how angry you get, that, you know what, we're not going to say these phrases. We're not going to use these words. We're not going to exhibit this type of behavior. We're going to speak the truth in love. And if you missed last week or the week before, I want to encourage you to go to our website and watch it. It's very important. Today we're going to talk about reducing stress, really kind of heading off conflict before it starts. I don't know if you heard about the recently divorced woman. She's walking along the beach, just kind of reflecting on how mean her ex-husband was during the divorce hearing. And she's walking across the beach, and sure enough, she comes across this magic lamp that's washed up on the shore, and she rubs the lamp, and you know what happens. Out pops a genie. The genie notices her anger and lets her vent a little on him. And he said, "You know what? For freeing me, I'm going to give you 3 wishes." But he says, "Here's the catch. I'm against divorce. So whatever you wish, I'm going to give your ex-husband 20 times the amount of whatever you ask for." The woman said, "Man, this isn't fair." But she goes and makes her first wish. She said, "I want $10 million. And poof, there's $10 million in front of her. He said, "I want to remind you, your husband now has 20 times that amount. So he's got $200 million. So she's fuming. And so she comes up with a second wish. She said, "I would love to have a beautiful, huge mansion right on the water with my own private beach." Sure enough, she gets that. And the genie reminds her, "You have to understand, now your ex-husband owns 20 of these all across the globe." And upon hearing that, it really kind of upset her, and she's just kind of pondering. And Jeannie was just about ready to give up on her last wish when she said, "You know what? I know what I want my last wish to be." And the genie reminded her, "You have to remember, whatever you wish, your ex-husband gets 20 times the amount." Lady said, "No problem." And she had this like really devious, grin on her face and said, "For my last wish, I want to give birth to triplets." Painful, man. Some of you guys are a little slow. You guys will be thinking about that. You'll be driving down 26th Street on your way out, and you say, "Hey, that was a funny joke." Hey, the reality is that our relationships are filled with conflict and disappointment. And sometimes, people actually have the wrong view of marriage. They have this unrealistic view which nobody can fulfill their expectations in marriage. Or they're just flat out wrong with the meaning and the purpose of marriage. And we're going to be looking at that next week. But the reality is this: marriage won't solve all your problems. The bottom line is marriage won't solve any of your problems. A lot of people think, well, marriage, created problems, or I didn't have any problems until I got married. You know what? They're dead wrong. Because here's what I've learned over the years. Marriage doesn't solve your problems. Marriage doesn't create your problem. Here's what I've learned. Marriage reveals your problems. If I'm cranky, guess what? My marriage is going to reveal that. If I'm a perfectionist, that's going to reflect and be revealed in my marriage. If I'm fearful, if I'm an insecure person, if I'm a worrywart, guess what? It's going to reveal itself in my marriage. If I'm bitter, if I'm angry, if I'm a manipulative type of person, it's going to raise its ugly head and reveal itself in the marriage. Marriage doesn't create problems, marriage reveals them. That's why this series is so important. That is why it's very important for you to invest in your marriage and take advantage of seminars, take advantage of books, position yourself to be poured into and really educate on how to have a better marriage. Good marriages don't just happen. It takes energy, it takes effort for a marriage to work. And here's the good news, is you don't have to change your whole life completely to make your relationships better, to make your marriage better. Minor changes can have huge impacts in relationship, in your marriage, in your friendships, with your boyfriend, with your girlfriend. I want to give you 4 no-brainers here today that will help you really reduce the stress in your relationships. And here's the deal. We all need to be reminded of the basics from time to time. And the things I'm going to share with you today, you've heard them before, but there's a difference between knowing them and doing them. My mentor, Pastor Bob, has a phrase that's always stuck with me. He says this: maturity is walking out what you already know. Maturity is walking out what you already know. So here we go. Here's the first one. Communicate well. Learn to communicate well. I don't know if you heard about the wife that came home to her husband about their car, and she said, man, we are having car trouble. Their carburetor has water in it. And the husband says, water in a carburetor? That's ridiculous. And the wife said, I tell you, there is water in the carburetor. And the husband says, pushing back, says, man, you don't even know what a carburetor is. You don't even know what you're talking about. And the husband says, you know what? I will check it out. Where's the car? And the wife responds, I drove it into the pool. Okay. Again, there's some of you guys, I know that's a funny joke, okay, guys? You got to work with me here. It's all about communication. For progress to take place in your marriage, you've got to talk to each other. And the problem is the average couple literally talks intimately. I'm talking about face-to-face 4 minutes a day. However, studies show that we will watch 46 hours of TV with our partner, with our spouse, but you only spend 23 minutes a week in really intimate, face-to-face conversation. And you can't make any progress in your relationship if you're not communicating, if you're not talking. And one of the reasons why we have problems in communication is because men and women communicate differently. And we all say, well, we all know that. But here's my challenge. We need to not just know that, but we need to make adjustments in our relationship. Men, we just love the facts. Women want the juicy details. Guys, we've got to be intentional to share details with our wife. This past week, I was up at a conference up in Ocala, came back in late Tuesday night. I was very intentional. Years past, I would have just walked in, Karen, and asked, hey, how was the conference? I said, hey, we went good, and went to take a shower and grab some grub. But I intentionally sat down with her and let her ask me questions about the conference. I told her about the conference, what I learned. I told her how I watched Everybody Loves Raymond reruns the night before, talked about breakfast. She told me stuff that she did while I was gone. Women like details. Men, we simply like the headlines. A man can describe, something in a word, where a woman is going to take time to give the details. I don't understand this, but Karen can take 20 minutes to tell me about a 5-minute phone conversation she just had with somebody. How is that possible? She only had a 5-minute conversation, taking her 20 minutes to tell me about it. But guess what? The vice versa. I can be in a meeting, or I can be in a doctor's meeting, and she's waiting for me. I come out, and I've been in a doctor for 20 minutes. She said, hey, how'd it go? Went fine. Give her a couple sentences. And she's looking at me, how is that possible? You met with the doctor for 20 minutes, and you're giving me a 3-minute summary. Again, we just need to understand, men, we see the big picture. They want the details. How many of you guys have ever been, maybe to somebody else's house with your wife or with your date, okay? And you're driving out of the driveway, you're going down the road, and your date or your wife says, hey, did you notice how the drapes really pulled out the colors in the carpet and all the accents they had through the house that just pulled all the colors in there? You're looking at it like, what are you talking about? The only thing you noticed is they did not have Monday Night Football on. Okay? That's the only thing we noticed in that situation. Men, they just we're the big picture people. Okay? Women like the details. And sometimes we have problems communicating just because we're not really in one another's lives or really understand how the other person's communicating. And so we need to step back. Think about how you think, and then think about the opposite way you think, and that's how your spouse thinks. Okay? So say that real fast 10 times, okay? But again, just slow down. Just begin to understand how that other person is thinking. Here's the second one. Be accommodating, which means willing to do what someone else wants or requests. Paying attention to what they need. Paying attention to their feelings. It means having common courtesy. Treating people with respect. Helping them any way you can. Ephesians 4:2 says this. Always be humble, gentle, and patient, accepting each other in love. Well, what does that look like? Man, you are in the fourth quarter of a football game. Your wife pulls up and she has a boatload of groceries in the car. This is what you do. You go out and you help her bring the groceries in. You open the car door for her. It's a little thing that go a long way. You're accommodating. James 3:17 says, but the wisdom that comes from God is first of all pure, then peaceful, gentle, and easy to please. This wisdom is always ready to help those who are troubled and to do good for others. It is always fair and honest. A mark of being accommodating is being considerate. When I'm accommodating, when I'm being considerate, the Bible tells me I'm being wise. We also need to understand the opposite is true too. When I'm being inconsiderate, when I'm non-accommodating, I'm being stupid in a relationship. Wisdom shows itself in accommodating the needs of our spouse, of our boyfriend, of our girlfriend, of our friends, of our relationship, and our life. Here's the third thing, learn to compromise. It's interesting, when you're dating, they say opposites attract, but when you're married, opposites attack sometimes. How many of you know what I'm talking about? What's cute when you're dating, sometimes not so cute when you're married. Let's just kind of do a little survey here. How many of you guys are punctual, in your marriage? Man, you're the punctual one. You need to be on time. You need to be there 10 minutes early. There's a few of us, okay? Don't be shy, okay? You got to be there on time. Now, how many of you guys are more creative with your time? Don't take your time and actually be slow just putting your hand up. It's okay, no rush. That's me. That's me. How many of y'all? My wife and I, we are opposite as night and day, man. I am trying to rush her out of the house. We're going to get there early. I have instructed my son, if I pass away first, you got to help your mother get to the funeral because she will not make it on her own. I've had that conversation with him. How about money? How many of you guys are savers? I cannot put my hand up on that one. Savers, put your hands up. Got some savers here, okay? Man, you have every penny accounted for. You have every penny budgeted. How many spenders, man? I'll put both my hands up, both my legs up, man. I'm a spender. Money burns a hole in my pocket. Okay, I got money. It's time to have some fun. Folks, it's on me. The party's on me. Raise your hand again if you're a spender. Okay, ushers, take note. Pass the baskets around to those guys, okay? All right? How about bacon? I love crispy bacon. I love crispy, burnt bacon, man. My wife loves it just kind of hanging, okay? Even wiggling a little, it's okay with her, okay? Opposites, again, attract. And the good news is if you're different, that's cool because God brings you together and you can complement one another in that. The challenge, though, is sometimes we end up with these conflicts. These little things can become big things. And all of a sudden, man, there's conflict going on, and there's bitterness and unforgiveness. And before long, we wake up and we're two different people living under the same roof. And you're asking a question, how did we go from being in love and where all the love songs on the radio made sense, and we were trying to outdo one another, buying little gifts of stuffed animals and greeting cards, to where we're fighting over everything and talking about divorce? It can happen so quickly. And 1 Corinthians 13:5 says, love does not seek its own, is not provoked. This is the mark of genuine love. It's unselfish. And what we need to know, again, just be reminded, like we talked about last week, all relationships are going to have conflict. No matter who you are, you're always going to have some things that you're going to disagree with your spouse. I don't care how much you love them. I don't care how long you've been with them. There's going to be some things that you disagree with. And the cool thing is, the greater your differences in the marriages, the greater your potential for spiritual growth. Because God wants to take your marriage, your relationships, and use it to help you grow spiritually and emotionally. He can take, a spouse that's far from God in your life and use it to cause you to spiritually grow. And one of the things that we need to learn to have a successful marriage is to compromise. You cannot always have your way. And just to go over a couple things you may need to compromise on, the kind of vacations you take. Some people like to see 82 places in 10 days. That's my personality, okay? I'm ADD. I don't like staying in one place. I like to go all over the place. My wife, man, she wants to stay in one place. Here's how we've compromised. We will maybe go out west, and we'll find a location, and we'll stay there for 5 days, and we'll take 5-day trips. So she had that nesting type feeling where she's kind of moved in, but we're still able to go on adventures. Then we'll move for the second half of the vacation to on another place. So we go to no more than 2 places. That's a compromise. A couple years ago, I took her off-road, and we got stuck way back in the desert of the Utah. And it was, we laugh about it now, but it was very scary, and it was a very trying moment for us. We compromised. For her to go back on vacation with me, I cannot go off-road, man. I've got to stay. I got to keep it on the pavement. So that is our compromise. I can get her back on vacation as long as I do that. We need to compromise. You need to compromise on the way you raise your kids, on how you spend your money. That's why it's so important, if you're planning on getting married, that you sit down with wise counsel, go through a pre-marriage course, go through some pre-marriage counseling, so that you can talk about these things ahead of time where they don't become a source of conflict for you in a marriage. You talk about how often do you want to make love, what type of day what time of day do you want to do that, and you need to compromise on how many times you're going to go see the in-laws, and the list goes on. How are you going to spend your day off? Man, once you get married, it's not like, hey, I know what I'm going to do with my day off. It's not I anymore. It's us. It's we. What are we going to do on our day off? It's now a family, and you got to think other people. You've got to think it's us. More marriages end because of inflexibility and unwillingness to change than really from anything else. And here's the final point. Have fun. I'm convinced that if there was more dating in marriages, there would be less marriages in divorce court. The problem is most people stop doing the thing that they were doing to win their spouse's love. You've got to keep dating your spouse. That's why I just want to challenge you. You've got to be committed to a date night every single week with your spouse. You may say, you know what, I can't afford that, man. We're just really tight with your budget. Be creative. It doesn't cost anything to go to the beach and take a walk on the beach with your spouse, or go to Riverwalk and take a walk and buy an ice cream cone, whatever that looks like. Once you create that time, that one-on-one face time, you've got to guard it. I can't stress that enough. Create it and then guard it. And if you don't, your marriage is going to suffer. And let me just say for the record, driving your kids to an activity is not a date night, okay? Sitting together watching TV is not a date night. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with watching TV, but don't scratch that off and say, hey, I had a date night. We watched 3 hours of TV last night, and we're zombies watching. You didn't have any interaction there. Or A date night not when you're trying to talk with each other while you're playing a game on your iPhone or texting somebody. We're talking about consistent, guarded, faithful, face-to-face, one-on-one time. Planned date night, weekend getaways. Ladies, by nature, I just want to tell you, we are achievement-oriented. We're goal-oriented. And you know what? What happens is, man, we see you in our lives. You say, you know what? I want her to be a part of my life. And so we do things that sometimes may be out of our comfort zone, and we take all our energies to try to win your love. So we're going to wine and dine you. We're going to take you to operas and ballets, whatever kind of floats your boat, so to speak. We want to do that. And what happens is, though, once we get married, what happens is, man, we kind of have this thing in our mind, okay, I need to now provide for this person. So the energies they provided to win you now is moved over to provide for you. And so oftentimes, again, if we're not communicating clearly and we're not really investing in our relationship, that could be mistaken. And so all of a sudden, the wife is thinking, where's my knight in shining armor? And the husband saying, man, I'm doing what I know I need to do. I need to show my love by now providing for my wife, now providing for my kids. And that's, again, where we need to understand we don't think alike and be sensitive to that and have that communication going on. And we need to be intentional about having fun and romance built into our marriage. Guys, we can't be focused on just our careers. We can't shift like that. We've got to go back and make sure that we have fun, we got romance going on in our marriage. Ecclesiastes says this, live happily with the woman you love through the fleeting days of life. For the wife God gives you is your best reward down here for your earthly toil. And this really goes both ways. We need to date our spouse. We need to make our relationship a top priority. Become best friends. Have fun. The problem is, sometimes the longer you're married, what happens is you're sharing the chores of marriage, but you've gotten away from sharing the joys of marriage. And so you need to develop common interests. You have to be intentional. Karen and I have purpose to do this, to identify things that we have that we want to do together. We play board games together. We love to go to movies. I pulled out the bikes this past weekend. I was given a tune-up to our bikes. I made an appointment where I'm going to have a trailer hitch, a bike rack put on my car next week so that on our days off we can go biking together. I go shopping with Karen. Okay, not all the time, but when I can and I'm available, I go shopping with her. Folks, I would rather be tortured by waterboarding than going shopping. But here's the deal. I'm with my wife and I'm entering into her world. And you know, I'm a people watcher. Okay, and we've all been there. We've gone to a restaurant and we're sitting across from a couple. And again, I watch people and I notice that, you know what, they haven't had any interaction. You know, they're either on their iPhones or looking out the window or whatever. They haven't had any exchange. I don't want to be that couple. They have nothing to talk about. Why? Because they don't have any common interests. Again, I don't want to be that couple. You must develop common interests. Sit down, come up with a list. Maybe the things that, you know, we're doing sounds boring and goofy to you. You come up with your own list, what you guys would like to do, and do that. Be intentional about that. The greatest thing you can do for your relationship, for your marriage, is to pursue God together. The Bible says this in Philippians 2, your attitude towards each other should be the same as that of Jesus Christ. And when you've got a husband and wife that are moving towards Christ together, it's bringing you closer together. There's nothing that can bring you closer together than pursuing God together. And when you move towards Him, you're automatically moving towards each other. Those of you that know Karen and I, you know we're opposite as day and night in a lot of areas. But the one thing that has pulled us close together is pursuing Christ. And we've learned from each other. We've learned to compromise. I'm more like she is than I was 40 years ago. That's how long we've been married. She is more like I am than she was 40 years ago. And we have learned, we're pursuing God. We're learning from each other. We're learning to compromise. The greatest thing you can do, again, is to pursue God together. You say, well, how do I do that? Well, the first step is this. If you haven't accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you invite Christ to come into your life. Second thing is you turn to your spouse and you say, hey, together we're going to commit our marriage to Jesus. We're going to treat each other like Jesus treated us. Third thing is you do what you're doing today. You position yourself. You come into services on a weekly basis. When you come to service, you are positioning yourself for spiritual growth. And when you spiritually grow, your relationship is going to grow with your spouse. And then find couples that want to make their relationships work. And one of the ways you can do that here at Church of the Cross is join a small group. Find other couples that are wanting to go in the same direction that you're wanting to go.